Buonasera a tutti, grazie di essere qui. Tolgo la mascherina per parlare meglio. E questa è una serata molto speciale per noi al Castello di Rivoli. Siamo molto felici di poter accogliere stavo per dire il regista, ma il regista, lo scrittore, l'uomo di cultura, l'attore Werner Herzog. Ma prima di passare all'inglese e alla nostra breve presentazione del film che andiamo a vedere insieme, vorrei ringraziare chi rende possibile i nostri programmi. Quindi inizialmente e principalmente la Regione Piemonte, la città di Torino, la città di Rivoli, la Fondazione CRT, il partner Intesa San Paolo con Gallerie d'Italia e la Fondazione Compagnia di San Paolo che sostiene le nostre attività di ricerca, ma soprattutto in questa occasione, che è una collaborazione tra il Salone del Libro e il Castello di Rivoli, desidero ringraziare il direttore Nicola La Gioia e i nostri partners in crime, o to get Werner Herzog here, Feltrinelli, perché come sapete domani Werner Herzog presenta il Crepuscolo del mondo alla fiera, giù al Salone. E mostly vorrei ringraziare Lena Herzog e Werner Herzog per essere con noi questa sera. So speaking in English, just very briefly, this evening we are in a very special moment. Yes, so I would like to say that now we will watch together, and I would like to ask Werner to give us a few introductory words about the film that we're going to see. I really wanted to show this film at Castello di Rivoli, but as an exhibition. Many years ago, in 2019, we requested the Cave of Forgotten Dreams, and they replied, yes, well, how many evenings do you want to show it? And we said, well, I don't know, 1,000. I mean, a long time, it's an exhibition. So it was quite surprising to the distributor, and we had to make a special deal which would allow us to actually show this film every day, and which was an inspiration for this exhibition, Espressioni con Frazioni, and an inspiration for many people because that experience of visiting the caves that had been discovered in 1994 in Ardèche in the south of France with drawings that were made 30,000, maybe 40, who knows, a lot longer than Lascaux or Altamira, really changed something. And on top of changing something, we were not able to go. So it was with the eyes of people like Werner Herzog, and it is with the heart and soul of people like Werner Herzog that we're able to actually access such incredible heritage of our past, which we will discuss after the screening of the film and speak about how you made it and so forth. So is there something you would like to share with us prior?
Well, we'll talk about it later. Thank you very much for inviting me here, and it's the first time that I see this Castello di Rivoli and the art collections at the separate house. It is very hard to get me into a museum. I have hardly ever managed in my life to get over the threshold into a museum. Sometimes my wife has managed to get me inside. So it's one special moment. And the film has been very important for me because in my adolescence, seeing for the first time in a book cave paintings, in this case Lascaux, was like the awakening of my own soul. And here in Chauvet Cave, it is like the awakening of the soul of the humans as we are. So it's 35,000 years ago. Probably some of it predates, but we do not know. Here we have a clear evidence where the human soul, as we are today, manifests itself. All the rest we'll talk about later. Thank you very much.
things that I would like to ask you about the film. Why, when, how, etc. But first, as I watched it for the 10th time, maybe now, it occurred to me to ask you something different first, which is, we have been taught in our European Western culture about Plato and Plato's cave. And Plato's cave is somewhere where we don't really find knowledge. We are slaves. And we must try, we only see the reflections of what is outside of the cave. And we must try to get out of the cave. But your film, 2,000 years later, says maybe the opposite. It's speaking about going into a cave to find meaning.
Well, I would be very careful of stressing Plato right now. However, there are very direct sort of references, and it's not we as human beings now see the cave, and that's why I have this postscript, a completely wild thing. But what is strange, you have the very large cave entrance, which was sealed off 28,000 years ago, roughly, by a rock, by rock slides. And as the entrance was very large, there must have been light very far into it. The paintings really begin very, very far back where there was no light at all, and you only could see and paint and visit the paintings with torches. And there's a strange finding also. You have a panel, let's say the panel of horses, and you step back and there's a wall behind you. You cannot step any further back. But at that wall, you have ash heaps of fire. So you cannot step behind the fires. You have to step in front of the fires, meaning your own shadow is being cast onto the panel. And people who visited the cave must have seen their own shadows, probably in a way interacting with the paintings. This is why I wanted to show Fred Astaire dancing with his own shadow. And of course, Fred Astaire, the moment that we saw is arguably one of the greatest moments of cinema ever. I can clearly say that. It is so simple and
it's
so...
It's from the Gold Rush, or?
No, the Gold Rush is Chaplin. No,
I think Chaplin and the Shoe.
What is it?
Well, and
it's one
yes,
of.
yes,
it eludes me right now, but you have to look into it. It's one of the wonderful films that show what possibly has happened to the people at that time, 35,000 years back. And of course, since we were only limited to very, very few movements, I did the light most of the time, and I did the sound. And I tried to create some sort of movement in shifting lights, and something appears out of this reduction of what we were allowed to do. I tried to create something that gives a little bit an impression of how these images were seen long time ago.
To go back to the beginning of this film, why did you want to do it? It's coming out in 2010. The caves were discovered in 1994. What brought you, and how did you arrive at such a project?
Well, in a way, of course, what we saw and what the film demonstrates, it's the awakening of the modern human soul. But in my case, it's very hard. I say, please touch this term only with a pair of pliers. The awakening of my own soul, of my own artistic or whatever, seeing the world and experience, comes from a book that I saw in a bookstore when I was 12 or 13, and it was from, this is actually Lascaux Cave. And on the cover of the book, I had walked past the window and something made me stop. And I stopped and I returned. And I looked into the window because I had seen something in the corner of my eye. And there was a book with one of the famous horses of Lascaux Cave. And I looked at it and I had never seen anything like this. And then I looked closely and it said, this is painting from a cave in France and it is 15,000 years old. And I could not believe it, and I immediately wanted to have this book, and I didn't have the money for it. So I immediately started to work in tennis courts as a ball boy and doing little menial jobs, but mostly as a ball boy. And I worked for 2 months, 3 months. I think after 4 months, I had the money to buy the book. And every week, I secretly walked by the bookstore. Is the book still there? My heart was pounding. My heart was pounding, and I was afraid. I was afraid that somebody had bought the book, and I couldn't buy it anymore. But the book, well, it didn't dawn on me that it was just a copy of thousands. And I walked into the bookstore, and I could pay for the book. And it was the first book I ever bought. And when I opened it, the shutter of, I can feel it until today. 70 years, 65 years later, I feel this shudder of recognition. And of course, the French are very territorial when it comes to la patrimonie. All the scientists are French. It was clear a French director would do it. And I went and I said, no, I have to do it. There are competent people. I'm competent as well.
So you went to the French government to ask for permission?
Yes, but there were three hurdles. One was the council of the scientists. Some of them had seen some of my films, so I kind of won them over. And then the French Minister of Culture. And I said to him, yes, I would love to do this film. And he started out to say he appreciated my films very much as a young man. He had seen these films, and it was very important for him. Yes, but of course. And he wanted to say, but you cannot do this. And before he said one word beyond but, I stopped him. And I said, Monsieur le Ministre, I am here because this is the awakening of my own soul. I have something more than the filmmakers. And I told him the story of the bookstore. And his name is Mitterrand, Frédéric Mitterrand, a nephew of the president. And he listened to me. And then there was a moment of silence, and he leaned over the table and said, you do the film. So, and I did the film then.
Very good. It's a good thing you did.
But it was more than a qualification.
I understand. It was a commitment.
No, something which awoke my soul.
Yes, but you proved a commitment through this origin of your soul.
Yeah, well, let's be careful about soul and all these things.
Yeah, let's be careful.
I got the permission to do this, and
And in how much time did you film? How long were you allowed in?
We were allowed only 6 days or 5 days, and only 4 hours a day. 4 hours, and we could only open the door once. Going in, we had to close the door and open the door when we went out.
One of the characteristics of this film and of many of your recent works is, of course, and the more leaning towards the documentary, is the presence of your voice. This very steady, sure of itself voice, and also a foreign voice, and with an accent. It seems I was interested in when and how this developed in your career of so many films. And I had originally thought, it's something kind of a more mature moment. But then thinking back to Fata Morgana, it occurred to me that Lotte Eisner, she is doing the same sort of function in the film by reading the Popol Vuh. So it's something that goes way back to your beginnings.
Yes, but that was Lotte Eisner, who was some sort of a mentor for me, and when she was dying, I actually traveled from Munich to Paris.
I want to ask that story.
Yeah. But
People love it. Let's do that later.
Let's go straight
Yes.
to your question about my voice. I did a film, The Great Ecstasy of the Sculptor Steiner, about a ski jumper, a man an athlete, a Swiss athlete who would fly on skis, and it was my dream to fly. And I wanted to be world champion, and as a young kid, I started training very seriously, and I wanted to make it to the German national team and then become world champion. It all ended in a catastrophic event when my best friend crashed so bad that he almost died. He was in a coma for a long time, woke up and is still alive. So, but for me it ended. I wanted to fly, and
Excuse me, did you say I wanted to fly?
Yes, I always wanted to fly.
That's the last word of Sentieri di Ghiaccio, of your book, after walking
yes, right. I said,
how interesting.
I said to Lotte Eisner, I had walked almost 1,000 kilometers and I was dead tired, and Lotte Eisner was out of hospital, and I said to her something very strange, because the last 85 kilometers I walked non-stop. I walked a day, I walked a night, and then I walked another day until I had arrived. So language has come apart somehow. And she pushed a chair next to me, and I put my legs up, and I said to her, together we shall boil fire and stop fish. You see, you do not boil fire, you boil water, you burn fire, and you stop the traffic, but you do not stop fish. So, and then I said, please open the windows, because from these days on, I can fly. It's very, very strange. End of story. But back to my voice, I discovered it during the film, The Great Ecstasy of the Sculptor Steiner, the man who flies instead of me now. And it was mandatory that the filmmaker had to appear in frame, not only the voice, had to give the chronicle. And I hated it, but finally I accepted it, and I discovered my voice as a little bit like a stage voice, and also a little bit hypnotic, because I did a film, The Great Heart of Glass,
yes,
where the entire cast acts under hypnosis.
Yes.
And I hypnotized them, and when you hypnotize somebody or a whole crowd, you actually can hypnotize a crowd easier, because there's some sort of a dynamic between human beings. When you stop in the car and you have to take a leak, all of a sudden everybody in the car needs to step out as well. So there's a common suggestion that functions better in this kind of little bit hypnotic form of speech you can find in this film or in other documentaries.
So you are hypnotizing the audiences, your audiences, with this slow and
I showed films to audiences that were hypnotized, under hypnosis. Because under hypnosis, you can be so deep under hypnosis that you open your eyes without waking up. And I wanted to understand about vision. We know very, very little about what constitutes vision. How do we see? How do albino crocodiles see the world? How would they see these paintings? So we have very, very little idea. And I would show them, for example, Agere, the Wrath of God. some of the people were like with a helicopter flying around and behind Aguirre, who is on screen, and circle around him. And very, very strange visual experiences that you do not have when you see something in 2D.
At that point, it was, of course, people in a helicopter, while in this film, you are using drones as well.
Only at the very beginning, when you see, when we are flying through the arc.
Yes.
Everything inside the cave.
Of course not.
Of course, there's no.
Yes, but again, hypnosis, and going back to Aguirre, since you bring it into the story, with the first film with Kinski, generally one associates your work with a fascination for a kind of hero figure who is an outsider and who is very, very obsessed with something to do. And this figure is isolated, and often you see with a side of sort of compassion or not compassion how it can easily become horrible. I mean, that these two sides are present, like in Nosferatu or in Aguirre, or even in Fitzcarraldo, and not the same in Kaspar Hauser, but still this solitude and somehow wanting to look at these figures. So this is what we associate Werner Herzog with. In this film, and in the most recent documentary, The Fireball, for example, looking at meteorites, there is no one character, let's say. There is some sort of a collective absence of a character, which might be the painters of the past. By the way, you use the word artists for them in a generic sense in the film. And it seems as though there's something more collective, kind of collective work, or looking perhaps at each of these scientists, these figures. It's very much a film about the scientists. Each one has focus, and each one could be a film, probably. Yeah. And this happens also in The Fireball. So can you somehow comment on that, or does it?
Well, it's very simple. The situation you're stepping into informs the shape of the film. So what you find on the ground informs. And of course, we had to talk to the scientists. And of course, there's one who used to be a circus artist. And I loved him, and that's why he's quite a bit in the film. By the way, the film is defective. It's actually 3D. Some of it, you can understand why it should be 3D. But for example, people are not identified with their names in writing, because in 3 dimension, it's very hard to find a plane, to find a distance for the writings. Or the French-speaking people are subtitled, or the German-speaking people subtitled. And we do not have it here.
In this case.
It's okay. The film
I'm very sorry.
It doesn't matter, even if we do not understand, well, like me, only a little bit French, it doesn't matter. I do not need to understand everything. So, but when you are doing a film in Antarctica, there's no way to do pre-production. You can fly only into Antarctica once, and you have to come back with a film. So you do something with it. And it's not only the kind of persons, it's a way of seeing the world and depicting and explaining the world. And there was a moment with Peter Zeitlinger, whom you see in the film, the cinematographer. We landed on the ice shelf of Antarctica in a big military plane, and you step out in the glaring sun. That's why I still have these professional sunglasses. You step out and you're blinded by the sun, and you know it does not go down for 5 months. The sun does not go down. Of course. And he looks around, and he says, Werner, how do we explain this whole continent to viewers back home? And I said to him, we are not going to do it. We will not explain anything. We will do it like Virgilio, like in the Georgics. We will not explain the beehive or the stables with the horses. We will do it like him. He sings the glory of the bees. It's
yes.
You see, it's and we show the glory of the cave, and we show the glory of these people who are working in there.
That brings me to the question of the sound and the music, which is you worked with Ernst
Reisiger,
with whom you've worked several times.
Yeah.
And it is, I think, choir and harp and some different...
Yes, in cello, very much is cello, yes.
And singing, so singing
Yes.
and cello. So can you tell us, or tell us about how that functions? Do you have all the images and then he makes the music? Do you go back and forth together? How does it, when is it recorded?
Well, he saw some of the key images very early on. And I would talk to him and I would say, we need cello, but he plays it sometimes in a very strange way, only with overtones. And it looks almost, it sounds almost like electronic, but here we would need more something where we recognize a melody and something that has a certain flow. And he would understand that. And normally I'm with the musicians always in the studio, not in the control room. And Reisiger, for example, before he starts recording, I take off his shoes. He has to be barefoot. Whenever he works with me, he has to be barefoot. Why, I can't explain, but he's better.
That's so interesting. This question of shoes and feet and barefoot and walking seems to be a recurring motif. If I don't remember incorrectly, to encourage a friend to finish a film, the first film, you said you would eat your shoe.
Yes.
And he did finish make the film, and you had your boiled shoe filmed by Les Blanc at Alice Waters' restaurant.
Yes.
And so, and this walking to Lotte Eisner, and you also walked the perimeter of Germany or something. So this question of shoes and feet, and Kaspar Hauser's ruined feet, seem to be something important in your imaginary system.
Yeah. Sure, of course. Much of my worldview comes from traveling on foot and, of course, of reading. And I keep telling young filmmakers, read. And I also try to tell them, instead of being on the internet, travel on foot, experience what's out there. And I can only vaguely describe it in a dictum. The world reveals itself to those who travel on foot. It's a very deep recognition of the world, of what the world is all about. It comes at you, it reveals itself. And in a way, all my films are films on foot. They're not films in limousines and with whatever, in jeeps. They're films on foot.
Yes. So it has to do with the scale, maybe also of the body in relation to the world on foot is very different from through a machine sitting at a computer or whatever. And what about the question of the crocodiles? I'd like to go back, whom you mentioned. When one sees this film the first time, it's quite surprising. And to me, I thought it was a comment on our climate change. I mean, it was 2010. I was shortly before and talking, for example, at that time with people like Donna Haraway, who was helping me think about the documenta. And then your film came, and it seemed exactly in the loop with what we were trying to understand about the emergent, what some people call the Anthropocene. I don't like that word. But it would seem that the postscript tells us, be really careful, because you might be as extinct as those people, and be careful about this warming.
I do not see it that way. I see it differently.
Okay.
Yes, there's an atomic plant, and of course for climate change, it is a blessing that we have it, that we still have them in transition.
In transition to clean nuclear energy.
Yes, but they are a blessing, in my opinion, right now. But what I try to do is a strange world of radioactive, mutant, albino crocodiles. Number one, they are not radioactive. They are not mutants. They are not even crocodiles. They are caiman that were bought in New Orleans or somewhere. So it's complete fiction. I take the audience under my arms and I take them into a world of absolute pure poetry. And they love it.
Yes.
Yes, and I love it. And what happened, it was never planned. When we finished filming, I said to the crew, I want to see this big plant because I have gigantic halls and hundreds of crocodiles. I want to see this. And we had our cameras packed away and everything was ready for customs and so. And I walk in and in the second entrance, small hall, there's an aquarium and there are albino crocodiles in there. And I see them diving up and all of a sudden they are double and they meet. And it's very, very mysterious as images. And I immediately said, get me the camera, get the camera, fast, quick, before they throw us out. And within 10 minutes, we filmed this. And I knew it had to do with the film and it had to do, how do we see today, 35,000 years later, how do we see these paintings? And how eventually, if these crocodiles escape and make it to the cave, how would they see the paintings? It's a perspective, and the strangest thing is actually a year later or 2 years later, 6 crocodiles escaped, and they were all recaptured except one. It's still at large.
So
maybe it has reached Chauvet Cave now and sees the paintings. But you see, I have, sorry for adding one thing.
Yes.
Of course, it's filmmaking and it's expensive and a network is involved and producers. And I called the producer and I said, I want to add a postscript to the film about radioactive mutant albino crocodiles. And he said to me, you are planning what? And hung up. So it took some persuasion to have. You see, there's a very powerful insistence on a vision. And everything in me as a man, as a soldier, was needed to have this postscript in the film. And it's some of the best I've ever done in my life.
I agree. I mean,
thank you.
I agree. but I know it's almost dinner time, and we do have mics for questions. We will take questions only if you stand up and move to the mic, if anyone is interested. But before, I have one or two more questions, and one is whether you agree. I think from all that you have said now, you do agree with the scientist who at the end says the Cro-Magnon changed the story because they brought in, let's call it culture or art, but mainly he said images more than verbal language. And he said
also musical instruments.
Music, yes,
dance,
of course.
Probably.
Yes, musical instruments. And he said that you asked him what makes us human, and he said the fact of leaving these signs for the future. So the idea that someone after, and it is a rather different reply to many of the historically known replies, like, Heidegger, what makes us humans is that we know we will die and we have language. But maybe it's not so different, because we know we will die is I will leave this image for the people of after. Is this something, can you say or something about this? And does it make even sense now to say what it is that makes us human?
Well, that's a big question. We should spend the next 4 years with.
I would love to.
This question.
I would love to.
What can I say? Number one, I personally have difficulties to enter a museum. It was in many years that I came into a museum here.
Well, thank you so much. We are very
it's
grateful.
a threshold, and it's somehow eternity a trial. That posterity, eternity, this concept of things, I have a very, very hard time with it. But I do understand why we do have museums. And I do understand the great beauty and value and dignity of what you are doing. You are showing it to the 5-year-olds who are coming here. And that's really wonderful. For me, a hard time to step into that. And of course, I also see a great value in oblivion. So I'm somehow torn between preserving and oblivion, and in many things. So, but of course, it's part of what makes us human, and it is certainly the first evidence of the awakening of the modern human soul, Homo sapiens or Homo spiritualis, which I like better as well. And Neanderthal man, we have no evidence of cultural activity. Very, very tiny first, let's say, ornaments that were found on shells or so, but not like this here, not symbolic depictions of a human being, the Venus of Willendorf, the Venus of Hohlefeld, a musical instrument, pentatonic music, dance probably, and on, and of course the most striking, the images.
To speak about then the editing, we spoke, you take interviews, for example, the man who was a circus, in the circus, and you put part at the beginning to introduce the character, and then the most emotionally charged moment of it comes at the end. And there is a kind of crescendo. You bring in other things like the crocodiles, and then, of course, the trip to Germany and to see the sculptures. When did that happen? We understood the crocodiles. When did it happen, and how do you weave together these things?
They come with great ease. I'm a storyteller, and I know instantly this is big. This is so big, I have to show this, no matter what, and I find a way to narrate it, to enhance it with music. You can change an entire world with music.
Yes.
It's a transformation of a world through music. You can do that as well, or through a camera. So it's my profession, that's what I do. And I recognize it instantly. And it doesn't take me long to film it. It was 4 hours for 5 days.
Plus the other trips.
Plus,
the
but
trip
that
to...
was only 2 days in Swabia.
So this is the secret of how you can be so prolific, is that you made your own film production as a young man company. You can do it all rather quickly. You don't like spending a hell of a lot of time writing scenarios.
It goes fast because I see a whole film. I see a whole film, and I can write it down as if I was copying. As if I see this and I describe there's an hour ox in the left, and there's a horse in the background, and it seems to move from left to right, and so it's like copying.
So
and it goes fast.
And the voiceover was written and corrected, or just was written?
No, I write it when
quickly?
I'm editing. I'm writing it immediately. I immediately speak it. I have a microphone only 3 meters away. I speak it, and then it turns out, this is 3 seconds too long. So I cut 2 words out, and then it fits exactly. So it goes instantly. And you see, I do not wait long. I never waited long. When I was 19, I sent 2.5 kilos of poems and texts to the best German publisher. They sent it back to me 3 weeks later, and of course a standard letter. And I said to my friends, I'm not going to send it now to the next 30 publishers. I founded my own publishing company, and I published my first books, 3 books myself. So that's how I function.
Which is a very good lesson. Very good lesson. And tomorrow you are presenting at the book fair this book. So we do some advertising for Feltrinelli also, Il Crepuscolo del Mondo, which is a wonderful story of Hino. Yes, the Japanese soldier on the island who thought the war was not over for so many years. And you met him in 1997 when you were in Japan doing an opera. And your most recent film, or one of the most recent fiction films, is Family Romance, LCC, which is kind of the true story, sort of a documentary, because the character is really a man who has a company, I think, if I understood correctly.
But it's all staged, scripted,
yes.
Everything is acted,
but with the
rehearsed.
Okay, so it's it's with a fiction
people.
with real people. So there's this Japanese, let's say, linea here. It's a moment where you've been, with the book and the film, thinking about that. I was wondering, as just a last question, if this may seem totally irrational question, totally irrational, but I always associate Japan with technology and somehow people being very, very high-tech. And is there something in these last years that you've been trying to explore around maybe machine learning, artificial intelligence, in relation to, or in contrast with the human? I mean, you made an advertisement to save people's lives who were texting in the car. So what is going on here?
You're raising many, many questions.
Yeah, I know,
so
but it's really one.
Yeah, but I'm not on the trip to Japan.
Okay.
So it's a statistical coincidence. Okay. And my wife, who is here, is my witness. I met Onoda, and it was a chain of coincidences that led me to that. And it was a chain of coincidences that I met her actually at Japanese in Berkeley 27 years ago. I'm a very lucky man. So, she actually met Onoda with me the first time when we were in Tokyo. So it's more a nexus that I share with my wife than with Japan. So it's a statistical anomaly. But I'm curious, and it doesn't matter if a story happens in Chauvet Cave 35,000 years back in time, or in Japan today in Tokyo, or in the 16th century with Spanish conquistadores in search of El Dorado. So it's me, the storyteller, I'm constantly into this, and the stories come at me with great vehemence. There's always a vehemence of images, stories, and so coming at me. I just order it and I put it into film.
Okay, then let me try to turn the question. Let's leave Japan aside and say we are now living in a period where everyone is speaking about artificial intelligence and making robots in MIT labs. And there were films, even popular culture films like, you know, Her and recently Him. It seems, I mean, I would like to understand, you speak about the soul and your soul, our soul maybe. What are your thoughts on this? Will there be an artificial intelligence that puts all the Werner Herzog films into a machine and makes a variation?
We have actually robots who can make films, but they will be never as good as mine. That's one thing. Secondly, as we can understand by now, artificial intelligence works only really in closed systems with very clear rules. Chess, for example, it has very clear rules, very clear frames,
yes.
And a clear dynamic, so fine. But today when you ask artificial intelligence for context, even simple context in language, please finish, I'm speaking now, please finish this ... and I mean sentence. Artificial intelligence cannot do that because artificial intelligence does not understand context, and it much less will understand in the near future or in the long-range future deeper syntactic nexus which is underlying human things or technological things, or for example poetry. There is such a thing in language. In language, in every language in the world, there's a very, very deep stratum, a deep under it dormant poetry, and you can evoke it, you can articulate it, the poet can do that. But the artificial intelligence cannot do it because it would go too deep into the very essence of human beings, and they will not be able to replace us. Yes, as robots, to feed you when you're paraplegic, and only with your thinking and connected to cables and whatever, you're sitting there and you think, please, robot, give me something to drink. The robot understands it and comes with a glass and brings it to your mouth, and there's a straw in it and you can drink. Yes, wonderful. There's wonderful possibilities in it, but don't believe that it's getting really very, very far.
Yeah. Maybe also, as thinking about you, and your soul, maybe also it doesn't lie. And I think lying is a really important thing for you.
Everybody is lying, or everybody is at least in
but
some sort of performance.
Yes, exactly.
And we are in performances when you are at a wedding. You are in a performance. When you speak to your children, you speak differently. When you serve in the army and you stand in formation, it's performative. And
you said a young filmmaker needs to lie to get permits to film. So you've said it in many...
To do forgeries.
Forgeries, yes.
Yes, you
pick
better
a lock.
do a forgery of a document,
yes.
of a shooting.
Yes, and you also teach them to pick locks,
yes,
in your Rogue Film School. So maybe that's also something connected with this, because if we wrote the algorithms to lie and do forgery and things, you know, it might not work so well with machines. I mean,
well, yeah, I don't want to go too deep into a discussion about artificial intelligence. It's very, very much in its infancy, functioning in closed systems, and in my opinion, is not going to replace the poet.
Yeah.
And the same thing like colonizing the universe, it is not going to happen. It will not happen. You don't have to be a scientist. Just wait with me the next 400 years and you will see.
Yes, it would be rather hot and dry. Going back to this, to end and then perhaps ask for people's questions and comments, truth and false, performance and reality. In your memory, was the experience, does the film do justice, let's put it this way, to your own experience of that cave?
It does, sure.
Ah,
yes.
how wonderful.
Of course it does, and all my films do justice to what I was going after. And sometimes, yes, I keep making mistakes here and there, and at the premiere of a film, I cannot see a film, I only see mistakes. Nobody else actually sees them, but I see them. And I can live with it. But very, very deep inside, I know I set out to make this film, and I came back, I brought it back. I brought that child back home. And it's part of the family now, and there is somebody, another one out there, and coming somehow at me, and I recognize that I have to deal with it, and I bring it in. Yeah.
Good. Grazie, thank you so much for being here. I think we have someone walking up towards a mic. Yes, of course, welcome.
Grazie. Magari faccio la domanda in italiano.
I will translate.
Vorrei sapere come all'inizio della sua vita come artista ha trovato la forza di credere in questa visionarietà di cui ha parlato prima e come questa connessione si è sviluppata nel tempo.
She asks how you, at the beginning, when you decided to do what you do, what gave you the energy and the vision to pursue this vision, and then how did this energy and force change?
Let's not speak of energy. My answer to energy is simple. I'm not into New Age, and I'm waiting for the energy. Energy comes from food.
She used the word force.
Actually. Force. Sorry.
I translated
it sorry,
incorrectly.
we got lost in translation.
Me, I used the word energy.
I understand.
Force.
Yeah. Okay.
La forza.
Yeah. Well, like many young people, I was rejected, and I rolled up my sleeves. And when I was 15, I was in school, in high school, and I started to work the night shift as a welder in a steel factory. So I worked every night until 6 in the morning. At 8, I went to school. So I have very little memory of the last 2.5 years in school. But I earned money, and I had money to make my first films. So that was that. And what keeps me going is somehow a clear vision. I see things at the horizon that others do not see yet, and I can articulate it. And that's why I'm the poet, or that's why I'm the storyteller. And that has carried me. And
Comprende o ha bisogno di una... Sì. Okay.
Yeah, what can I say? Are you a filmmaker yourself, or an artist?
Yes, I'm an artist photographer. But my question specifically was, I tried to speak English.
Can you speak a little bit louder into the
yes,
microphone?
here?
Yeah.
I'm an artist photographer.
For what?
Artist photographer.
Yes, we understand. What was the question? Okay. No, si capisce.
My question is, how did you, at the beginning of your path, how did you find the strength to believe in the visionarity that you were talking about? Not how did you find the money to do things, but to believe that your vision was something
worthwhile
you could root on, you could trust.
Well, I don't fully understand the other.
I think I think she's wondering how you were sure that it was worthwhile for others maybe to see what you do, that it was worth your making this film, putting it in the world, and not just becoming a welder and that's the end of it.
Yeah. No, it's it's self-evident, and you see, the legitimacy comes from no one. The legitimacy comes from inside of me. What I'm doing is self-evident, and that it's made for audiences is also self-evident. And I can give you an example. Fitzcarraldo, moving a ship over a mountain is something that has never happened in technical history. It's a vision that I had, and it's a very archetypical sort of vision. And my feeling is it is like a big metaphor. Until today, I do not know metaphor for what. So don't ask that, but I know it's a very big metaphor that is in many of us. Like in literature, the white whale, like Moby Dick. Moby Dick is a big metaphor, and you can't really explain it very precisely either. And the white whale or the ship over the mountain is something which is deep inside of you and deep inside of many here in the audience. And I'm the one who can make it visible. I'm the one who moves the ship over the mountain, and I make it visible. And I wake up in you an image that's not completely new. It's an image that probably is dormant inside of your mind, inside of your soul. And I can make it visible. And that's the legitimacy why I'm doing it. And this is the reason, and this is the force behind it, and that's a vehemence that's behind all of this. And I cannot answer it why and how, and so I simply say what I'm doing. That's what I do. That's my profession. And I'm the soldier. I'm a soldier, not an artist.
La prossima persona.
I will try to speak in my best English. First of all, I would like to have the proper words to thank you for all your work and for your beautiful voice that hypnotize in every history that you telling us. I know that I cannot have the proper words because this is not my language, but I know that just the tone of my voice can tell you how grateful I am. And my question, I have actually two questions. You speak about yourself as the storyteller. And when you say you want to say the story, no matter the time, no matter the place, it's the story that speaks across to you. I would like to know if for you, the storyteller is someone that inhabitates every time or every place, and there is no limitation for someone to tell a story. It's like to say, not in a metaphoric way, but in a very material way, that someone like you that can be that storyteller can live in that cave in the same way that the man of that cave, the artist, been there, or like the Alvin Cayman in the pool, and you feel that kind of presence across to your voice, as if these characters of your stories inhabitates inside of you. And my other question, okay.
Yeah, let's go for that. Well, in a way, I see myself in these images, and I know it's actually me. And it doesn't matter if it's 35,000 years back in time. And there's a story there, and there's human beings who created that, who have a visual language that comes very close to my own visual language, or the visual language that you see in the history of art. All of a sudden, this kind of recognition, it is me, or I should not speak about me so much, it is us. It's us. That's what we are. That was what makes us into human beings. The cows in the field do not do that. And we have a phenomenal privilege that we can do this here. And in a way that I can make images and films and stories is like a great privilege. But of course, I have worked for it. I'm a working man.
Just to connect with this answer, actually, my second question is that as a storyteller, are you the person capable to translate the point of view of anything that can be heard? As you said in this last part of the film, you want the view of this caveman to be seen. How this caveman can see these pictures in the cave, and you are the one that structurates across to your own voice. So I would like to know if for you is like your work is some kind of translation of every being across your stories.
No, you cannot translate everything. There's a mystery, and we know very little about, or almost nothing about Cro-Magnon man who did this painting. We know literally nothing about them. And yet we can deduct many things, and we can feel cultural memory. We feel a cultural memory sometimes. Le Minotaure et la femme, which Picasso did, and I don't like Picasso very much. That's another thing, but as if he had been in contact with them. But he died 20 years before the cave was discovered. And much of it is a mystery. And it's beautiful that stories have mysteries, unexplained things in it, dark moments in it that follows us into our dreams. So I'm not a translator. I'm not into that business. And well, the beauty of storytelling, the beauty of what we see is that it's overwhelmed by unexplained, by untranslated, by mysteries.
Thank you. And there's one more question.
Good evening. So proud to be here. I just wanted to ask you if you could have some suggestions about the transition from documentary to feature film, and how would you bring your poetry and protect it in the context of fiction film?
I do not make this distinction as clearly. For me, the borderlines are fluid, because in documentaries very often I script sometimes, I stage things, I cast characters, I mean real characters, but it's like casting for the best actor. And I repeat certain things like you would do in a feature film only. So many elements are taken from, in documentaries, are taken from feature films and the other way around. I don't care. I couldn't care less. I do my films, each one is just films. I make movies. And of course, I do other things like acting, and I'm very good as a villain. I can be very frightening on screen, and I know that I'm good at it because I frighten people. And when I was in Jack Reacher, my wife gets a frantic call from Paris. Are you married to that man? We can give you shelter. You're only a flight away, and we have a guest room, and we can protect you. So when I heard that, I knew I was good on screen. So it's many different things where the borderlines are fluid between my own acting and acting of actors on the screen, between documentaries, feature films, music,
the opera,
voice.
all the work in opera.
So in many ways, the distinction between documentary and feature film shouldn't maybe be so precise, because the borderlines are fluid into all other fields as well, into operas. I'm staging sometimes an opera in movies. So sometimes something very athletic comes into a film, but in high stylization. the great ecstasy of the sculpture Steiner, an athlete who flies. And so physical experience all of a sudden has no borderline with my film. So I don't care about definitions and about categories. It's in a way as if you see my life.
Thank you. So I believe that everyone is off to their evenings.
Yes, it's gotten late. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
very
you so much.
Yeah,